Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com with another reminder that we are living out Eisenhower's warning from 1961. As this video proceeds, I'll explain what I mean by that. Albert Einstein said, "Blind trust in authority is the greatest enemy of the truth." This is trending on Twitter this morning. He'll listen to the scientists. The Hill, Trump says Biden will listen to the scientists if elected. Well, the way that's phrased, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. Let's look at what he actually said, though. President Trump mockingly warned at his rally in Nevada late Sunday that Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden would listen to the scientists if elected and there would be more lockdowns to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Trump told attendees in Carson City that supporters of his opponent would surrender their future to the virus, saying he's going to want to lock down. He'll listen to the scientists. Trump added in a mocking tone before saying, "If I listened totally to the scientists, we would right now have a country that would be in a massive depression instead. We're like a rocket ship. Take a look at the numbers." Those sound like pretty reasonable comments, but they're being taken out of context by the press to create a big lie. Let's look at Biden's comment, which President Trump is referring to.
Sworn in come January, and we have coronavirus and the flu combining, which many scientists have said is a real possibility. Would you be prepared to shut this country down again?
I would be prepared to do whatever it takes to save lives, because we cannot get the country moving until we control the virus. That is the fundamental flaw of this administration's thinking to begin with. In order to keep the country running and moving and the economy growing and people employed, you have to fix the virus. You have to deal with the virus.
So if the scientists say, shut it down?
I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists.
The left and the press claim that they listen to the scientists, but they're actually doing the exact opposite. Twitter blocked a post from an advisor to President Trump who suggested that masks do not work to stop the spread of coronavirus. Scott Atlas tweeted, "Masks work? No." And then NBC News threw in their own comment, "Researchers have concluded that masks can control the spread of the virus." This is another big lie by NBC News. Scott Atlas is a well-respected scientist, and researchers have concluded the exact opposite, that masks don't work. In May, a study from the Center for Disease Control concluded that evidence from 14 randomized controlled trials of these measures do not support a substantial effect on transmission of laboratory-confirmed influenza. Twitter blocked Dr. Atlas for citing this study from the CDC. And a few months ago, Dr. Fauci said exactly the same thing, that the public should not be wearing masks.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often, there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask, and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course.
The press and social media say that President Trump isn't listening to the scientists, when in fact it's them who's not listening to the scientists. They censor any scientists who tell the truth about climate or COVID or any other topic. Spike magazine had a good article on this topic in August. The left's shameful abuse of the science. When Democrats say they're the party of science, they really mean don't question us. What the press and social media do is they'll find a few scientists who support their political agenda, and they censor all the other scientists who tell the truth. President Eisenhower warned about this danger in his farewell speech in 1961. Yet, in holding scientific research and discovery in respect as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite. Now let's look at how a small group of academics has seized control of public policy. The CDC director says 90% of the population is vulnerable. PCR tests make people believe the virus is everywhere, and mask mandates make people believe the only reason they're still alive is because they have a piece of cloth over their face. Let's look at point number one. The CDC director says 90% of the population is vulnerable, but this simply isn't true. The scientific literature shows very clearly that T cells keep most of the population immune.
Dr. Redfield today said that more than 90% of the population remains susceptible to coronavirus. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that Dr. Redfield misstated something there. And
So he misstated last time and
I'm
today?
going to answer your question if you let me finish. The data on susceptible that he was talking about was his surveillance data that showed that roughly 9% of the country has antibodies. But when you look at the CDC data state by state, much of that data is old. Some of it goes back to March or April before many of these states had the cases. That's point number one. Point number two is that the immunity to the infection is not solely determined by the percent of people who have antibodies. If you look at the research, and there's been about 24 papers at least on the immunity from T cells, that's a different type of immunity than antibodies. And without being boring, the reality is that according to the papers from Sweden, Singapore, and elsewhere, there is cross immunity, highly likely, from other infections. And there is also T-cell immunity. And the combination of those makes the antibodies a small fraction of the people that have immunity. So the answer is no, it is not 90% of people that are susceptible to the infection.
So I guess my question is, I'm not a doctor, I defer to your expertise on this and to his, but so Americans hear one thing from the CDC director and another thing from you. Who are we to believe?
You're supposed to believe the science, and I'm telling you the science.
So he's not telling us science.
I'm telling you the science, and that's the answer. And if you want to look up all the data, you're free to. You can also talk to the following epidemiologists.
I guess why is he still going out before Congress and speaking if you say he's misstated today and the president said he misstated last time? Americans are looking for the best information right now.
Yeah, and I'm giving you the best information, and it's confirmed by people like Martin Kulldorff, who's a Harvard epidemiologist at Harvard Medical School. Let me finish, please. Jay Bhattacharya and Johnny Anides, both epidemiologists at Stanford. Professor Gupta, University of Oxford. These are people who know the latest data on the immunology and what's happening, and I just recited it to you.
What the CDC director said is incorrect, and Dr. Atlas is being censored because he told the truth about this topic. The PCR tests are garbage. Even the New York Times says that 90% of the positives are false. But the PCR tests allow propagandists to say, we're having a record number of cases, even though it's patently false. So based on the big lies of number one and number two, people believe that a piece of cloth over their face is the only thing keeping them alive, and that mask mandates are necessary. People believe that they're vulnerable, and they believe that they're surrounded by all these potentially deadly carriers of the virus. Everyone else is a mortal threat to their existence. Every tyrant in recent history has cherry-picked scientists to support his agenda. Hitler listened to the scientists about eugenics. Stalin listened to the scientists about Lysenkoism, and Mao listened to the scientists and starved tens of millions of people. A tyrant can always find a few incompetent or corrupt scientists to support their agenda. Dr. Atlas and President Trump are being censored and attacked because they cited the actual science, whereas Joe Biden is citing the junk science which suits his agenda. I was discussing this on Twitter this morning when someone named Stephen Bryce jumped in and said, "You know that you're using the internet to bash science, right?" And then he blocked me immediately after he posted that. Had he not blocked me, I would have responded to him that I was probably on the design team of the microprocessor running his computer. This is how the left thinks. They believe that because technology exists, any junk science being purported by their politicians must be true. The great American physicist Dr. Richard Feynman said, "Science is the belief in the ignorance of the experts." President Trump's viewpoint is absolutely correct. President Eisenhower was absolutely correct. And Joe Biden is dead wrong. But he says, "I'll listen to the scientists," and people turn their brains off and submit to tyranny. Dr. Atlas just responded to his censorship on Twitter with this quote from George Orwell's 1984. "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. And if all others accepted the lie which the party imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth." Toto thinks we're in very dangerous times with a few evil scientists who are willing to lie, controlling the agenda. Having said this, President Trump needs to be more careful with his words. He knows that they'll be taken out of context, and he needs to come up with different ways of phrasing his point. He could have said, "Joe Biden will listen to the wrong scientists and shut down the economy and destroy your lives." Had he included one more word in his sentence, he could have opened up a debate instead of shutting it down. The public needs to learn that there are plenty of wrong scientists out there, particularly in academia, who are politically motivated and have no clue what they're talking about. Toto and Kyrie are working very hard to get this point across. You can visit them on the web at realclimatescience.com.